Welcome back, everybody. You're watching Yesteryear TV, and these are the best horror movies that we love, the best horror movies of all time of the year 1963. Let's check out what was scaring audiences all over in 1963. The Kiss of the Vampire. When a car trouble strands a honeymooning couple in a small southern European village, an aristocratic family in the area reaches out to help them with sinister consequences. The Kiss of the Vampire. This movie is scary and spooky. Santo and the Wax Museum. El Santo, the masked Mexican wrestler, investigates a series of kidnappings. He discovers that the mysterious Dr. Carroll is using the victims as part of his experiments to develop an army of zombies. Santo and the Wax Museum. This Mexican wrestler made a ton of horror movies. The Birds. Drama, horror, and mystery. A wealthy San Francisco socialite pursues a potential boyfriend to a small Northern California town that slowly takes a turn for the bizarre when birds of all kinds suddenly attacks. Black Sabbath. Boris Karloff hosts a trio of horror stories concerning a stalked call girl, a vampire-like monster who preys on his family, and a nurse who is haunted by her ring's rightful owner. Black Sabbath. This is a horror film. Black Zoo. The owner of a small zoo uses the animals to kill his enemies. Drama and horror. So back then, they had animals killing people. The Black Zoo. Next up we have is the scary movie called Blood Feast. Horror. An Egyptian caterer kills various women in suburban Miami to use their body parts to revive a dormant Egyptian goddess, while an inept police detective tries to track them down. Blood Feast. Challenge the Devil. Fantasy and horror. A group of dropouts find an old man in a castle. The old man subsequently turns into the devil and seizes them. Challenge the Devil. Starring Christopher Lee. The Comedy of Terrors. Dishonest undertaker Waldo Trumbull and his sidekick Felix are creating their own customers when they cannot find willing ones. Comedy and horror. The Comedy of Terrors. This movie is good with Vincent Price. The Crawling Hand. The hand of a dead astronaut comes crawling back from the grave to strangle the living. Now, this movie is kind of corny when you look at it, but back then it was scary. Picture the body has no torso, no head, no nothing. It's just a hand killing people. The Curse of the Crying Woman. After 15 years of being away, a woman returns with her husband to her aunt's hacienda in the Mexican countryside, without realizing that her relative is a sorceress who wants to use her to kill people. The Curse of the Crying Woman. The Day Mars Invaded Earth. Martians replace a scientist and his family to pave way for their invasion. The Day Mars Invaded Earth. More sci-fi corniness, but this was also a horror film. The Day of the Triffids. Horror and sci-fi. After an unusual meteor shower leaves most of the human population blind, a merchant navy officer must find a way to conquer tall, aggressive plants which are feeding on people and animals. The Day of the Triffids. Dementia 13. A scheming widow hatches a bold plan to acquire her late husband's inheritance, unaware that she is being targeted by an axe murderer who lurks in the family's estate. Dementia 13. Horror Castle. Women are being tortured to death with various torture devices in the dungeon of an old castle by a deformed, hooded Holocaust survivor. Horror Castle. This movie is good. A lot of kills and jump scares. I think you'll like it. Next up we have is House of the Frights. Now this movie says it all. This movie has everything from scares, thrills, kills, basically spooks and goblins, things that go bump in the night. That's why it's called House of the Frights. Whoever enters the house may not come back alive. The Ghost. A woman and her lover murder her husband, a doctor. Soon, however, strange things start happening and they wonder if they really killed him or if he is coming back from the dead to haunt them. The Ghost. Next up we have is a scary movie called Tomb of the Torture. Horror. A woman is tormented by dreams that she is the reincarnation of a dead countess. Her father, trying to get her to stop the dreams, takes her to a village near the castle of the late countess to see what's going on. Tomb of Torture. Monstrosity. A rich but unscrupulous old woman plots with a scientist to have her brain implanted in the skull of a sexy young woman. Horror, mystery, and sci-fi. Monstrosity. This garish monstrosity of a film. I love it. Next up we have is The Old Dark House. Comedy, horror, and mystery. In England, an American car salesman ends up spending a stormy night at the mysterious and deadly mansion of a client's family. The Old Dark House. This movie is creepy and spooky. Paranoiac. Drama, horror, and mystery. A man long believed dead returns to the family estate to claim his inheritance. Paranoiac. This movie will not disappoint. And if you like jump scares and payback, check it out. The Raven. A magician who has been turned into a raven turns to a former sorcerer for help. The Raven, starring Boris Karloff. Who doesn't love Boris Karloff? He was so popular back in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and here he is in the 60s. Santo in the Hotel of Death. Remember the masked wrestler in Mexico? Mystery and suspense catches up with our crime-fighting hero once again. Santo in the Hotel of Death. So if you like lucha libre, Mexican wrestling, Santo movies are good. Silent Playground. A psychiatric patient under care in the community gives barbiturates to children. Silent Playground. This movie is kind of sad and creepy and scary because someone's poisoning the kids, getting them on drugs. 6. She's and a He. A soldier stranded on a desert island is captured by a tribe of sadistic women who torture and mutilate the men who oppose them. 6 She's and a He. Horror. So this movie is also weird and creepy, but it's a scary movie, so you gotta check it out. One of my favorite movies of 1963 was The Slime People. After Los Angeles is invaded by an army of subterranean monsters, a small group of people must fight for survival in the deserted metropolis. The Slime People. So this is almost like The Blob. Terrified. A masked lunatic kills off people in a haunted house. Terrified. Then maybe John Carpenter got the idea for Halloween with Michael Myers, the masked killer, from Terrified. A masked lunatic killing off people. So, Terrified. Next up we have is The Damned. Drama, fantasy, and horror. An American tourist, a youth gang leader, and his troubled sister find themselves trapped in a top-secret government facility experimenting on children. The Damned. This movie is creepy but good. The Incredible Face of Dr. B. Horror and sci-fi. Count Brankoven is a mad scientist who is trying to become immortal by draining and then drinking liquid from his victims' brains. The police are desperately trying to catch him. The Incredible Face of Dr. B. So now he's drinking liquid from the brains of his victims. The Invasion of the Vampires. A doctor and his assistant hunt down a vampire named Count Frankenhausen, who is terrorizing the populace. The invasion of the vampires will not disappoint. If you like Dracula and vampire movies, check out this movie. El Beso del Ultratumba. A newlywed couple finds themselves broke when the woman's father dies deeply in debt. Forced to sell their belongings, they move into a run-down house from which they get very bad vibes. Are they being haunted? The Terrible Yeti of the Snow. A man and his wife discover they are in danger when they hear reports of a Yeti that lives on a nearby volcano and is on the prowl. The Terrible Yeti of the Snow. Horror and sci-fi. The Blancheville Monster. The beautiful young daughter of a crazed count fears that she will fall victim to the family curse, to be sacrificed to fulfill an ancient family legend. The Blancheville Monster. Horror. Next up we have is one of the best movies of '63, The Maniac. Crime, horror, and mystery. An American painter has an affair with a bar owner in a French village and agrees to help murder her husband, who has escaped from a prison for the criminally insane. Maniac. Crime, horror, and mystery. The Strangler of Blackmore Castle. Crime, horror, and mystery. A strangler is loose on a British estate, and he not only strangles his victims, but brands an M onto their foreheads before he decapitates them. That's pretty good, huh? The Whip and the Body. The ghost of a sadistic nobleman attempts to rekindle his romance with his terrorized, masochistic former lover, who is unwillingly betrothed to his brother. The Whip and the Body. The Haunted Palace. Charles Dexter Ward arrives at a small village to visit the house he inherited from his ancestor who died there 100 years ago. The Haunted Palace. This movie is creepy and scary, but it's good. I totally recommend it. The Haunting. Hill House has stood for about 90 years and appears haunted. Its inhabitants have always met strange, tragic ends. Now Dr. John Markway has assembled a team of people who will try to investigate. The Haunting. The Terror. A French army officer, Lieutenant Duvalier, has been separated from his unit and receives help from a mysterious woman. The Terror, featuring the legendary Boris Karloff. He did a lot of horror movies. He was very good at it. Him and Vincent Price did a lot of horror movies. Twice Told Tales. 3 horror stories based on the writings of Nathaniel Hawthorne. In the first story, titled Dr. Heidegger's Experiment, he attempts to restore the youth of himself. This movie has 2 stories, horror, mystery, and romance. Violent Midnight. Horror. A war veteran from a wealthy but troubled New England family is suspected in a series of brutal murders in a small town. Violent Midnight. This movie is creepy but good. X, the man with the X-ray eyes. A doctor uses special eye drops to give himself X-ray vision, but the new power has disastrous consequences. Horror, sci-fi, and thriller. X, the man with the X-ray eyes. So what do you think about the horror films of 1963? Were there any films that jumped at you that you remember, that you don't remember but want to check out? I've seen most of these movies of 1963, the horror films. And again, when I watched them, they were all in the 70s. So back then, they were very creepy. They were black and white. They were very good. And they were scary for the time. You can look back at them now. But if you appreciate good horror, mystery, suspense, the acting, the writing was very, very good. There are some cheesy films out there. But they're fun to rewatch. And if you haven't seen them, I think you'll enjoy them. So those were the best horror movies of 1963. Thank you for watching and joining me here at Yesteryear TV. I'm Tony, and I'll see you all in the next video.